to them. Lord, we think of those who have lost loved ones through this time. And we also think of those who are undergoing treatment at this very, very difficult time when services are under so much pressure and there's so many worries, Lord. Lord, we know that we have a fallen and broken world, but there is hope, and there's hope in the form of our Lord and Saviour Jesus Christ, who has already overcome the world, a hope that is willing to embrace the lost and the brokenhearted, one who died on the cross to pay for our sins, so that we would be reconciled with you, our Lord. So in all things we do today and going forward in every day, may we do it fulfilling our main purpose in this life, and that's to glorify and honour your ever-blessed name. So forgive us our every sin, for Christ's sake. Amen.
Thank you very much, Councillor Murray. Thank you for that. Can I now ask Tim Langley, Legal and Procurement Manager, to take the city out? Mr. Langley.
Councillor Nominee MacDonald, Convener.
Vote.
Councillor Rodney Mackay, Leader.
Yeah.
Councillor Callum Macmillan.
Commissioner.
Councillor Ian Archie McNeill.
Commissioner.
Councillor Donald Manford.
Commissioner.
Councillor Paul Francis Steele.
Commissioner.
Councillor Roddy Mackay.
Commissioner.
Councillor Ian Murdoch MacLeod.
Commissioner.
Councillor Ushton Robertson.
Commissioner.
Councillor Grant Fulton.
Commissioner.
Councillor Paul Anthony Finnegan.
Commissioner.
Councillor John Graham Mitchell.
Commissioner.
Councillor Ranald Fraser.
Commissioner.
Councillor Angus Morrison.
Commissioner.
Councillor Norrie MacDonald.
Commissioner.
Councillor Alistair MacLeod.
Commissioner.
Councillor Finlay Mackenzie Stewart.
Commissioner.
Councillor Keith Dodson.
Commissioner.
Councillor Ray Mackenzie.
Commissioner.
Councillor Angus McCormack.
Commissioner.
Councillor Charlie Nicholson.
Commissioner.
Councillor Ian McLean Macaulay.
Commissioner.
Councillor Neil Mackay.
Commissioner.
Councillor Gordon Murray.
Commissioner.
Councillor Donald Finlayson Crichton.
Commissioner.
Councillor John A. McKeever.
Commissioner.
Councillor Callum McLean.
Commissioner.
Councillor John Mackay.
Commissioner.
Councillor John Norman MacLeod.
Commissioner.
Councillor Kenneth MacLeod.
Commissioner.
And Councillor Kenny John MacLeod.
Commissioner.
So present, Convener.
So that's 31 members present. Thank you for that. I think we're all very well versed in the conduct of the meeting, but a reminder of the following points, if you don't mind. Please ensure that your camera and microphone are off. I will call on the relevant officer to present their report. And if a member or officer wishes to ask a question or raise a point, please do so using the raise your hand function on your device. I will invite each member in the queue to speak, and at that point, please switch your microphone and camera on. After you have spoken, please ensure that you lower your hand and put your mic and camera off. Your device should be positioned so that your image is clear to the other participants, and please speak clearly and concisely directly at the camera. When calling for agreement of the recommendations at each item, a no show of raised hands will be taken as an indication of the committee's approval. With regard to declarations of interest, members are reminded of the protocol. You must leave the meeting by ending the call, which will be confirmed by the moderator to the chair. And following consideration of the item, you will be invited back into the meeting by the moderator. Please ensure that you are available to accept the invite to rejoin. And before we move on to the agenda proper, I would like to mention the following tributes. Skolfag Hestel, I'd like to pay tribute to Skolfag Hestel Eilean, who recently won a Film G Award in the Gaelic Learners category for their film Shallow Ur. On behalf of the Comhairle, I would like to congratulate Skolfag Hestel on this award. Skol Ballyvanich Pipe Band, I would like to pay tribute to Ballyvanich Primary School Pipe Band, who recently won first prize in the Scottish Schools 2021 Freestyle Championships primary category. This was held online and was the world's biggest school pipe band online event. Skol Ballyvanich were the only school in the Western Isles who entered this year. On behalf of the Comhairle, I would like to congratulate Skol Ballyvanich on this award. Cara Hanlon, I would pay tribute to Cara Hanlon, who's been selected to compete in swimming trials for the Olympic Games in Tokyo. She is believed to be the first person in the Western Isles to have been selected to compete at this level. Cara is currently ranked #1 in Scotland in both short and long courses, and is Scottish national champion in 50 metres, 100 and 200 metres breaststroke. On behalf of the Comhairle, I would like to congratulate Cara on her selection and wish her all the very best at the upcoming British Swimming Selection Trials on the 14th to the 18th of April. That concludes the tributes. Can I move forward to the minute of the meeting of the Comhairle on 3rd of February? Not seeing any hands, so I can take that as approval, as to accuracy. And the Comhairle meeting on the 23rd of February 2021, again for approval as to accuracy. I'm seeing a hand up, Councillor Gordon Murray.
Sorry, convener, it was the previous minute. I think the last sentence says Mr. Gordon. I think they've just forgotten to put Mr. Gordon Murray in.
Okay, we'll make sure that's corrected in a minute, Mr. Murray. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
I'm seeing Ronald. You're still not seeing. No, that's okay. Sorry. Okay. Can we move on then to item 2, declaration of interest? You are invited to declare an interest in any agenda item at this point. If you become aware of an interest during the meeting, then I would ask that you declare it at that time. And when declaring an interest, it would be helpful if members could indicate briefly the nature of that interest. This helps to make your decision making more open and transparent for the public. Are there any declarations of interest?
Convener.
Councillor Crichton.
Thank you, Convener. I'll be declaring interest in item 5, given I'm a trustee of the Stormway Trust Estate, and I will be leaving the meeting to discuss.
Thank you for that, Mr. Crichton. Any other declarations of interest on any of the items? Again, you'll be able to do that throughout the meeting, but I'm seeing Councillor Culmaclean's hand up.
Yes, I have the same as Councillor Crichton. However, I will not be taking part in the vote if a vote takes place.
Sorry, say it again.
I will not be taking part in the vote if a vote is to take place.
Can we just be clear that Councillor McLean is declaring an interest, however?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yes.
But not leaving the meeting.
No.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Just clarify that. No more declarations of interest at this point. And again, I would remind members, if you do have an interest later on in the agenda, please let us know. Moving on to questions, item 3. And the following written question has been submitted by Councillor Gordon Murray. Councillor Murray.
Thank you very much, Convener. My question is, would the Convener agree with the Comhairle SNP Group's long-held aspiration to harness our God-given energy resources by converting these to carbon-free energy and thus replenish our coffers annually to help address funding deficits and capital projects? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Murray. And my response is as follows. From the inception of the Energy Innovation Zone strategy in 2000, the Comhairle has had a long-standing vision for a true local energy economy that would see energy consumption across the Outer Hebrides being met by on-island generation. This is presently articulated in the corporate strategy, where Recovery and Renewal Strategic Theme 3 seeks to demonstrate leadership in reducing our island's carbon emissions and maximising the socio-economic benefits derived from our renewable energy resource. The strategy seeks to utilise our renewable resources to meet our energy needs and decarbonise the islands while adapting to and mitigating against climate change. There are a number of priorities relating to energy and climate change, including proposals to work with stakeholders to develop a mechanism that would allow locally generated electricity to be delivered to local consumers at a competitive price and further develop Hebrides Energy as the vehicle for local energy supply. Moving on now to planning applications. Pursuant to the Comhairle Scheme of Administration, as the following planning applications are classed as a major application under the hierarchy of development regulations, it must be determined by the Comhairle following consideration by the Planning Applications Board. The Board recommended that item 4 below be approved at its meeting of the 29th of March 2021. The minute of this meeting has been added to Dropbox. In respect of item 5 below, the Planning Applications Board of the 29th of March 2021 agreed to refer this item to this meeting of the Comhairle. As the Comhairle does not consider such applications on a regular basis, I would remind members of our agreed process for determining such applications, and also that you must have taken part in planning training to participate in the decision. Any amendment contrary to officer recommendations moved by a member must be based on planning reasons. If such an amendment is proposed, the chair may choose to adjourn the meeting pursuant to the timeout protocol. Members are reminded that a decision which is not based on legitimate planning reasons would leave the Comhairle exposed to the risk of legal challenge and potentially significant costs arising therefrom. We move on to the first of these planning applications, and the report is by the Head of Economic Development and Planning. And the report seeks delegation to the Director for Communities to determine the planning application without further reference to the Planning Applications Board or the Comhairle, assuming the process raises no new sensitive issues and no significant body of representation is received against the planning application. There are recommendations for approval at paragraph 3.1, and I'm going to ask Morag Ferguson to speak to the report. Morag. Sorry, I'm seeing Councillor Charlie Nicholson's got his hand up. Councillor Nicholson.
Thank you, convener. Sorry, I should have come in earlier. It's my last day on the Stornoway Trust, so I will have to declare an interest in regards to the agenda item.
Okay, and will I ask the moderator to remove you for this particular item, and we'll bring you back in later?
Thank you, convener. I'll just sit and listen. Thank you.
Okay, all right. Thank you for that. And ask, sorry, Malcolm, did you want to come in?
Sorry, convener, I'm just checking this is not in relation to a planning matter, in which case, I think.
Well, it is related to a planning matter, and that's why we, at the start of the meeting, we asked that anybody who has an interest to declare, they need to declare that interest, and they also need to vacate.
Yes.
Vacate the.
Yes. So if Councillor Nicholson's interest is in relation to the planning matter, I think you should leave the meeting.
That's fine, convener. Thank you. I will leave the meeting just now.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Nicholson, and we will call you back in as soon as this item has been dealt with. Thank you for that.
Thank you, convener.
Morag Ferguson.
Okay, thank you, convener. Good evening, members. The development of a deep water port forms part of the master plan for the development of Stornoway Harbour to allow it to accept larger and deeper shipping, as well as a greater number of ships. Members considered a report with a detailed presentation in December 2019. Most of the works in relation to the deepwater port development will be carried out under the Harbour Revision Order and Marine Licence, and planning is concerned mainly with the access works and the allied on and off-site impacts. Since the planning permission was granted in December 2019, the design of the port has evolved, and a fresh application is now required for the revised access, the access to be moved marginally south of that formerly consented. The slide here shows the outline of the former scheme of works for phases 1 to 4. There is now a proposal to carry out within a single phase the works to construct the port itself, to construct the new primary access road, which is the top left of the drawing here, and also to create the link road through from the deepwater port to the existing Arnish Industrial Estate, Arnish Fabrication Yard. The planning issues are highly likely to be very much similar to those that were identified in the previous application. The Stornoway Port Authority are looking to submit a revised application for the revised works and looking for it to be determined within fairly tight deadlines to accommodate funding requirements. The report therefore seeks delegation granted to the Director of Communities to determine the report, subject to no significant body of objection set out in the recommendation. I'm happy to take any questions, convener.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Morag. Does anybody have any questions for Morag on any of the issues that she raised as part of that presentation? If so, we need a show of hands. I'm not seeing any hands going up, so we can assume that the Comhairle is recommending that grants delegation to the Director for Communities to determine the planning application without further reference to the Planning Applications Board or the Comhairle, assuming the process raises no new sensitive issues and no significant body of representation is received against the planning application. So we'll take that as accepted. Call Councillor Nicholson back in now. Councillor Nicholson, are you back in now?
Thank you, convener. Yes.
All right, thank you. Move on then to item 5.
Convener, I'm declaring interest in leaving.
Apologies, Councillor Crichton is declaring an interest in item 5, Dunblane Wind Farm in North Gloucester, and he has just left the building, not the building, but the room rather.
Convener, I will as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else declaring an interest in this development? I'm not seeing any hands. Okay, this report again is by the Head of Economic Development and Planning, and the report seeks planning permission to construct a wind farm comprising 14 wind turbines up to 140 metre two-blade tip, and install associated infrastructure including access tracks, crane hard standing areas, substation, form temporary construction compounds, lay down areas and borrow pits at Drumlehen, North Tolsta, Isle of Lewis. This is the proposed development. A copy of the planning application documents, the EIA non-technical summary, the EIA report and the EIA supplementary information are available to view on the Planning Public Access portal under reference 1800216 PPDM, and there is a recommendation for approval of paragraph 3.1, and I'll invite Morag Ferguson again to speak to the report and supported presentation as well, and Morag will answer any questions that members have. Morag.
Thank you, convener. Members, the presentation which I'm about to run through has also been uploaded to the Dropbox, should it be easier for members to view in that format. The report before members today, as the convener has said, relates to an application seeking planning permission to construct a wind farm comprising 14 turbines of up to 140 metres in height, located at land at Drumlane to the west of North Tolsta on the Isle of Lewis. The application is both a major application and an EIA development. Consistent with a previous decision of the Comhairle, the proposed development is acknowledged as being contrary to the Comhairle's development plan. The current application has attracted 380 contributions from members of the public, these largely from residents of Tolsta, with views expressed both for and against the proposal. Some contributors raised concerns around the decision-making process and considered that the application should be determined by Scottish ministers. I'll come to that further in the presentation. The report is lengthy and it is indicative of the challenge of bringing together the various issues that fall to be considered and to present the assessment of the issues both clearly and fairly for all parties. The decision on the application is, however, one for the Comhairle, having taken into account all relevant matters. The slide is just to set out briefly the structure of the presentation. The presentation aims to summarise for members the proposed development and will provide a brief comparison with the consented development. There's also a brief summary of the relevant decision-making framework. I'll then take members to review the wind farm subject of the current application. That will then be followed with an explanation of the approach that has been taken to the assessment of farms.
I'm sorry, Maura, you're breaking up. Can you start the last bit again?
There's a brief summary of the relevant decision-making framework. That's in response to persons who had indicated that they were looking for the Scottish Government to make the determination. I'll then review the wind farm that's the subject of the current application. I'll then follow up with an explanation of the approach that has been taken to this particular assessment. I'll then review briefly the development strategy of the Comhairle per the development plan, and I'll provide some comment on the public input that has been received given its significance in terms of both material and non-material considerations. Then the report will conclude by reference to the discussion that has been set out in the report and the recommendation. As stated by the convener, the proposed development and the application that's before members is for a wind farm comprising 14 turbines of a tip height up to 140 metres in height, and to install the associated infrastructure, which includes up to 8 kilometres of access road, crane hard standing areas. A revision to the application in that now there is a single substation from temporary construction compounds both to the north and south of the site, a laydown area for components, and to open and restore 2 borrow pits. Just by way of comparison, the development that was formally consented on the same site is for a wind farm of 14 wind turbines with a blade tip height up to 126.5 metres. The remainder of the infrastructure is set out on the screens, similar to the existing.
I think more is 126.5 metres on the screen. Sorry, am I right?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, thank you.
This new application requires to be assessed upon its own merits. The assessment of the application concurs with the 2013 assessment in that the proposed development is also contrary to the development plan. The decision therefore rests upon the weight given to material planning considerations, and the presentation aims to provide clarity over the process that has been followed in order to consider and give weight to those material considerations in order to arrive at a recommendation. Members recently considered a report on another large-scale wind farm that was the subject of an application made under Section 36 of the Energy Act, the ultimate decision on that to be made by Scottish ministers. The application before the Comhairle today, however, is for a wind farm of 14 turbines with a combined output of 48.3 megawatts, and being a wind farm with a total output of less than 50 megawatts is a planning application which falls to be determined by the Comhairle. The Planning Act states that planning decisions must be made in accordance with the development plan unless material considerations indicate otherwise. The development plan for the purposes of this application is the Hebrides Local Development Plan 2018 and the Allied Supplementary Guidance for Wind Energy 2018, albeit largely based upon the 2016 version, which was readopted at the time of the new development plan. I'll now take members through some slides just to describe the current application. First of all, the location of the application site is shown on this slide. The North Tallsta, located to the north of Stornoway, roughly halfway between Stornoway and West and Naas on the east coast of Lewis. The application site in total extends to 261 hectares. It's located on an area of moorland lying to the west of the crofting settlements of North Tallsta and New Tallsta. It's helpful to highlight the distance between the wind farm and some viewpoints, albeit I have not included all these viewpoints within the presentation. Jumping Head on the Eye Peninsula is 10 kilometres to the south of the development. The Lewis War Memorial, just west of Stornoway, is 15.5 kilometres southwest of the development. Call is 5.5 kilometres southwest. Moorneck Hill, which is the only kind of elevated landform in this area of the moor, is 3.5 kilometres to the west. Barvis Junction is about 17 kilometres. The viewpoint here to the south, immediately to the south of the wind farm, is just as you arrive into North Tolsta, just before you dip into the glen, and it's about 900 metres, so just short of 1 kilometre south of the wind farm. And then there's a further viewpoint here, which I will have a slide for, which is on the Heritage Trail just to the north. Just to the north of Tolsta, on a walking trail between Ness and New Tolsta, and that's 2.2 kilometres from the wind farm. This slide shows the relationship of the wind farm, again outlined in red here, with the other wind farms that are both consented and proposed. In green here is the Stornoway wind farm to the west of Stornoway, and down here is the Ishkin wind farm on the Ishkin estate. Pentland Road wind farm, and some of the community wind turbines, the one at Tolsta, the one at Shawburst, and the one at Golson. And then these are the wind turbines on the Arnish Moor and at Creed, and the community turbines for Point Power here within the Stornoway wind farm group. These concentric circles set the distance from the wind farm. So this inner one, it's in bands of 5 metres. This inner one is at 5 metres. This one at 10 metres, 15 metres, 20 metres, and so forth. I think you
mean kilometres.
Yeah, sorry, kilometres.
Thank you.
Sorry, I should have said that cumulative effects on the wind farm, cumulative effects on views of the wind farm with other consented and proposed wind farms is largely confined to views from the Eye Peninsula. So the villages in Point will be able to view this wind farm at the same time as the others. And there will also be some views on the Heritage Trail from Ness of this wind farm in conjunction with Stornoway. This next slide shows the location of the wind farm in relation to the village at Tolsta. The wind farm itself is indicated by the red line boundary here. It's located on the moor to the west. Members may wish to zoom in on the detail of this image. I'll first of all maybe just talk members through it, and then allow zoom in to a little bit of visual unit. Tolsta itself is a crofting settlement with a crofting landscape. You can see that by the green land. Bounded in blue are the groups of houses within the village. These were the subject of an assessment for the impact of the proposed wind farm on their residential visual amenity. Further to the east as the Thrive Ord Beach, which are popular with both locals and visitors alike. At this point, I would want to highlight that the collective harm to community residential amenity is a material planning consideration. Development undertook extensive assessment on residential visual amenity, and we examined that aspect of the EIA in some detail. Our assessment has been set out in paragraphs 10.373 to 10.401 of the report. We concluded that while half the houses in the settlement would experience a high magnitude of change from their homes and gardens, that living conditions would not be harmed to such an extent that any home would no longer be suitable for habitation. I accept that as a high bar test, but that is the test that is used for the test for residential visual amenity. That, however, is not to say that the impact on general visual amenity in views towards and from within the village would not be significant and adverse. However, it's a different test. So just allowing members to see, this is the northern access to the wind farm, and the border pits would be located here and here. And these first houses in New Tallstar are ones that are very close to the entrance to the site and would also be relatively close to the border pits. Then the southern access to the site is located here, and again this group of houses at Lochside is again a group that is relatively close to the access. This slide here is the proposed layout from a 2020 revision of the application that was submitted in 2018. The main revision has been the repositioning of this turbine 12 about 90 metres from where it was originally proposed, and the substations now reduced from one and relocated from where they were here to a single substation to be located here, where it's shown in blue. The slide is also to demonstrate that Tallstar has a very defined settlement edge along this boundary here. The wind farm, which is bounded in red, will be sited in an area that lies between 1 and 2 kilometres of the settlement edge, which is contrary to the Comhairle's own development strategy for the siting of wind farms. Further to the west of the wind farm, the land is part of the Lewis Peatland Special Protection Area and Special Area of Conservation. As mentioned, the site would have two accesses, 2 points of access from the B895. The north access is already an access, it exists as an access, a township track access, and that would be widened and upgraded. This would form the main construction access to the site and to the border pits until the wind farm track itself, the interior wind farm track, was constructed, whereupon this new access to the south would then be opened. All the components for the wind farm, the heavy and long loads, would be delivered to this access to the site and would not travel through the village. This is just assumed inversion of that same thing, just to show the site in slightly greater detail. Two border pits, marking of the westerly border pit, and the words to turbine 14 would be restricted in the summer months due to their proximity to a golden eagle nest site. The easterly border pit would be capable of being worked all year, but is the one that is sited closer to the village. That would require both border pits to be subject to noise and dust mitigation. This next slide shows the southern part of the site in more detail. The laydown area and the proposed substation would be within 500 metres from the houses here in Lochside. Turbine 12, this one here, on the substation have been repositioned due to their proximity to a sea eagle nest site. And for the same reasons, there will be restrictions on the construction of turbine 13 as set out in the conditions. This slide shows the substation. It would be the site, the compound would take over half an acre and would have an L-shaped substation building and also other external equipment sited within an internal compound. This next slide shows the elevations of the proposed substation, 21 metres by 22 metres in an L-shaped formation. It would be no higher than a domestic house to the ridge. It would be about 5.5 metres high. The slide shows the main construction compound, which would be located to the north of the wind farm. It would have site huts, site huts, car parking. The larger compound is to the north of the site. There would be a smaller one to the south. All the construction workers' traffic would therefore travel through the village, but long and abnormal loads would not travel through the village to this compound. The slide shows the proposed turbine. It would be 140 metres in height to tip height. The rotor diameter, the hub height would be 81.5 metres high. Consented wind turbine is 1 to 6.5 metres to the tip height with 80 metres to the hub height. Therefore, there is very little difference in the hub height between the consented and the proposed turbines of the consented and the proposed. The main difference arises due to the length of the rotor blades. Turbines would be painted in light grey, semi-matte finish, and as said previously, in addition to the turbines, there will be a significant amount of infrastructure to accompany them. Each one would require an area of hard standing along with the turbine foundation. Each hard standing would take about a third of an acre in area. 8 kilometres of access track, as well as the 2 border pits. I will now take members through some visualizations of scheme. This first visualization is from the Lewis War Memorial, which is 15 kilometres from the site. I'll just attempt to zoom in on the image to just let members see the wireframe. So at the top of each of these is a wireframe. That's a computer-generated model of the wind farm. So here you would see each of the 14 turbines grouped together in a fairly tight group. And off to the right here is the tallest community turbine, which has a height of 77 metres to the tip. And with that is transposed onto an image of the an image taken from the War Memorial. Again, you can see the wind farm there, and which would be wholly against the skyline, and the community turbine off to the right. This next visualization is taken from Tank, and it's 11 kilometres from. It's taken 11 kilometres. Again, at the top, N would be seen as a group of turbines together. Again, the community turbine off to the right. Then that information superimposed on photograph to scale. Next visualization is from Jumping Head from the Eilean Peninsula. You'll be looking straight across to the wind farm. This is 10 kilometres across Broad Bay. From this viewpoint, the wind farm, all of the turbines again would be visible, and the community wind turbine would be silhouetted behind. It would sit in the middle of the group here. This next visualization, this was an additional viewpoint that was requested by ourselves following receipt of the 2018 application to illustrate how the wind farm would be experienced from within the settlement. The position at which it's taken means that the 2 extremities of the wind farm are not within the shot. Turbine 13 to the south and turbines 2 and 14 to the north are out with the limits of the panorama. Again, here members can see, these would be turbines where hubs, blades, and in some views, some of the turbine would be visible. And if I just take that down to allow members to see it. You can see from that slide, I mean, that is with the rotor diameter of 117 meters, turbine tip height of 140, and the hub height of 81.5. And then this is the final visualization in this part of the presentation, and it is taken at the B845 at just as you enter. It's 900 meters away from the southern edge of the wind farm, or rather 900 meters away from the closest turbine, which would be turbine 13, which is this one. And it's just as you dip into the glen before you enter the village. The community turbine again is out of the shot. It's just over the rock here. So from this position, given that you're 900 meters from the turbines, it is illustrative of their scale, bearing in mind that when you enter the village, the nearest turbines are just 1 kilometre from the nearest houses, albeit viewed in a different position. So members, if I can now just take you very briefly through the development strategy of Comhairle's own development plan. And that's just before I move on to the specifics of the assessment, I draw members' attention to a couple of important matters. The development strategy is the principal policy of the development plan, and its purpose is to guide development to the right places before you start looking at the detailed consideration of set out in other policies. Wind energy developments and out with settlement areas, the policy directs you to the spatial strategy for wind farms. In this case, the wind farm is sited within what's termed an area of constraint, where wind farms may be appropriate in some circumstances. When you look at the spatial strategy, the proposed development is located wholly within 2 kilometres from the edge of the settlement, a buffer that has been set for community separation from wind farms. In terms of location, therefore, there is a conflict with this primary policy of the development plan. Therefore, when you move on to assessment of the detail, the proposed wind farm, on account of its close proximity to the settlement, is judged to have significant adverse effects on views within and towards the settlement of Tolsta. It also to adversely impact on the landscape in and around the site, and for half the houses in the village to experience a high magnitude of change in their residential visual amenity. While there are noise and shadow flicker effects, these are to be mitigated by software solutions, and therefore their significance of effect is effectively neutralised. Second matter I want to touch on before I move into the assessment is to acknowledge the importance of public input to the planning process. While there are genuine and understandable reasons why people support development and why people oppose development, it is only reasons that are material to planning that the decision maker can take into account. The volume of representations in this case are indicative of the level of interest and concern, but it is not how many representations that are for the development or how many that are against the development that matters. What matters is the particular issues that have been raised within representations, and it's these issues that fall to be assessed for their planning merit. Paragraphs 11.1 to 11.65 of the report are dedicated to responding to and addressing the matters that have been raised in representation. These comments include points read the process for determination of the application, the location of the wind farm, climate change, the interconnector, economic benefits and harms, landscape and visual impacts, noise, shadow flicker, impacts on ornithology, peat, trees, water, site reinstatement, construction impacts, impacts on roads, quality of life, turbine lighting. The other matter that is important is in terms of community benefits associated with the wind farm. And it is important to stress that any community benefit fund offered by any applicant for a wind farm is not a material planning consideration. The government's own guidance in that regard is clear, and that has been confirmed at section 10 of your reports. The guidance states community benefit schemes are voluntary arrangements offered by renewable energy businesses to communities located near developments and are not a material consideration in a planning application. Therefore, any kind of community benefit enhancement offered cannot be secured through planning, and any benefits that may flow from such an offer cannot be reflected in the taking of a planning decision. I can take members on to the application now. The application is an environmental impact assessment development, and new application was submitted with a comprehensive environmental impact assessment report. This considered the potential impacts of the proposed development in relation to a range of topics which are set out on the slide there. The committee report considered these issues in the policy context, summarised consideration of each undertaking in terms of the environmental report, and provided an assessment of each issue overall, drawing on the response by specialist consultees. If I can now just say a little bit about the approach to assessment of this application. In this case, as in all cases, there's a structured list of issues to assess. It has, however, not been easy to reconcile the competing considerations in this case, given that neither the consented development nor the proposed development are in compliance with the development plan. The assessment has therefore of necessity been carried out in two distinct stages. The first stage of the assessment has considered this as a new proposal on the application site, considered within the legal and policy framework that is relevant as of today, including material considerations, both those raised in public input and others from national policy guidance. And we have set out in the report an assessment of how officers have given weight to the issues in a planning balance. That's the first stage of the assessment would be what would inform a recommendation of the new application assessed on its own merits were it not for the grant of a previous consent. So that's the first stage of the assessment. The second stage of the assessment acknowledges that planning permission was previously granted by the court and considers how weight should be given to that planning history, given that the new proposal is not identical to that formerly consented, and on the face of it could be argued to intensify some of the harms of the consented development. I'll deal with stage one of the assessment first and then come later in the presentation to stage two. As I said, the first stage is to consider the application afresh on its own merits in the context of the current development plan, other national policy and guidance, and with regard to material considerations, including matters raised in representations, and to weigh those in the planning balance. This slide sets out the positive, negative and neutral impacts of the development. Section 10 of the report before members has set out the detailed assessment, and it is quite lengthy. Section 11 considers the material considerations. Then between paragraphs 12.1 and 12.17 that is set out the positive, negative and neutral effects in a planning balance to allow a conclusion to be arrived at on the current proposal prior to consideration of the planning history and the existing planning permission. The positive benefits likely to result from the development are to the economy, to carbon saving and reduction in greenhouse gas emissions, each of these having been afforded moderate weight, which is consistent with the conclusions of the applicant's own environmental impact assessment report. The negative effects largely stem from the wind farm being sited in close proximity to the settlement. Significant adverse effects on views in and around the settlement of Tolsta, moderate to significant from Tong and Comhairle and from Jumpin Head, and in culmination with other developments from views within the villages on the Eye Peninsula generally. While overall the integrity of landscape character would be maintained, there would be significant adverse effects on landscape character at local level. There would also be significant adverse effects on blanket bog and wet heath habitat, and significant adverse effect may occur to some bird species, in particular golden eagle, in combination with the golden eagle population, which is assessed together between the Western Isles, Coll and Tiree. Then on the third column there, the neutral effects, and these sometimes have initially been considered to have significance, but then with the application of mitigation, which would then be controlled by condition, are effectively neutral effects. At the end of that first stage of the assessment of the application, the judgment of officers is that the proposed development of the 14 turbines of 140 metres high on a site which is located between 1 and 2 kilometres from the edge of the settlement would not be in accordance with the plan, and that material considerations, having considered them in a planning balance, do not carry sufficient weight to take a different view. That is consistent with the assessment and recommendation by officers in 2013. However, it requires to be acknowledged that the site has a planning history and a second stage of assessment is therefore necessary. So, the next challenge is how to give weight to the planning history and planning permission.
I'm sorry, Morrigan. I mean, your sound is breaking up quite a bit there. Can you start the stage 2 assessment again, please?
Okay. This slide sets out how we have given weight to the planning history, and extant planning permission acknowledged that a live planning permission on the site. So, starting point is to acknowledge that, notwithstanding the conflict with the spatial strategy and other key policies of the wind farm, that it is the principle of development of a wind farm has been established on this site. And on account of an application to vary some of the conditions on the original consent granted in considered in 2013, there is a live planning permission granted in 2017 for 14 turbines of 126.5 metres in height. That permission comprises the fallback position. In other words, the developer could implement that planning permission held, and therefore that is a significant material consideration. However, the proposed development before members today is not identical to the former consented development, and therefore it would not be correct to take the view that the planning history can automatically be given 100% weight to counter the non-compliance with the plan. It's therefore relevant to consider the difference in the effects of consented development with the effects of the proposed development. The view that officers have taken is that the lesser the difference in effect between the two, between the consented and the proposed development, then the greater the weight that could be afforded to that planning permission. But ultimately, the weight to be given to this or to any other material consideration is one for the Comhairle as the decision maker. It's also been relevant to consider how the policy context has changed since the wind farm was initially consented. Dealing with that matter, first of all, the changes in policy context were set out in paragraphs 12.18 to 12.19 of the report. Scottish planning policy has been updated. It places climate change and sustainable development at the heart of national policy guidance. It also recognises the visual harm of wind farms and gives planning authorities the opportunity to set a buffer not exceeding 2 kilometres between a settlement edge and wind farms for consideration of visual impact on community amenity. At the same time, the government has strengthened its climate change targets with a greenhouse gas emissions net zero target by 2045. That was set in 2020, and through its onshore wind policy statement in 2017 has lent weight to onshore wind as a technology crucial to decarbonising the energy system. It lends support to measures to aid the sector in finding routes to market, including support for larger, more efficient and larger wind turbines to maximise power output from any wind farm site. Comparison of the proposed development with the consented development is set out in detail in paragraphs 12.20 to 12.34 of the report. The difference of the effects on the wind farm on most of the planning issues assessed was considered to be neutral in terms of the difference. Of those where there was a difference, the proposed development with an output of 48.3 megawatts compared to 42 megawatts of the original consented development would power an extra estimated 2,000 homes with clean energy. At the same time, the impacts on visual amenity would increase, but they would be mainly local to the settlement of Tolsta, which, to be fair, is where most of the representations, both for and against the proposal, have come from. By how much that harm would increase is a subjective judgment for the decision maker. Impacts on Blanket Bog would also increase slightly, as the larger wind turbines would require larger foundations and further displacement of Blanket Bog habitat. To allow members consideration of the difference in visual effects at locations in and around Tolsta, a comparison of visualisations is necessary. The following 4 visualisations are also included within Appendix 3 to the report. Officers consider it important to have those visualisations in the public domain along with the report in order that people could consider for themselves the difference between the turbines subject of the proposed development versus those in the consented development. This first slide is visualization which you saw earlier on in the presentation. It is at B895 approaching Glen Tolsta. Consented development is at the top slide and the proposed development is below. So turbines are 1.26.5, the bottom are 140. That visualization is taken at 900 metres from the nearest turbine, which is turbine 13, which is the largest one to the left of the slide. Some members may also notice that there is a slight difference between the turbine, which is directly above the chicane sign on the road. That is turbine 12, and is the turbine that between the 20 has been repositioned 90 metres north-northeast of its former position in order to distance from Sea Eagle's nest site. This next visualisation is from the Heritage Trail at North Tolsta. This is as you're travelling from Ness on the heritage trail coming down towards the village. To the left of the slide, you'll see like the smaller beach, Triera, I think it's called. And again, at this point, you are 2.18 kilometres away from the nearest turbine, which is turbine 14, which is the larger one, not immediately to the right, the second one from your right. Again, the consented development is 1.26.5 at the top of the screen, and the proposed development of 140 to tip height at the bottom of the screen. This next slide is within the village of Tolsta. It is roughly 1.5 kilometres away from the nearest turbine. It's up just near the school and the village hall. And again, the top image is the consented turbines at 126.5. And the bottom image is a visualization with the 140-metre turbines. And then this final comparable slide is New Tolsta. Again, you've seen the bottom image before. The consented development at 126.5, and at the foot of the page, the proposed development at 140. Again, you'll see a difference on the left-hand side of this visualization in that the two turbines the turbine furthest to the left in the top image has moved closer to the next one. That's turbine 12, which has been repositioned. So members, in conclusion, when assessed on its own merits, prior to consideration of the planning history, it is concluded by officers that the development is contrary to the development plan and that material considerations did not indicate that a decision be taken otherwise. In the second stage of assessment, consideration has been given, first of all, to the change in policy context in the year since the first consent was granted. That exercise found that there was policy support that weighed both in favour of and against the proposal. That, therefore, did not help swing the weight one way or the other in terms of our consideration of the matter. Consideration has then been given to the difference in the effects of the consented development and the effects of the proposed development. And the major effect of that is on visual amenity with major significant adverse effects concluded by the applicant's EIA and by our own landscape advisors. The other side of that is that the wind farm as now proposed would power an additional estimated 2,000 homes with green power. How much greater the harm of the proposed development to views in and around the settlement is a judgment for the decision maker. In terms of arriving at the recommendation, officers took the view that the adverse effects of the proposed development were not significantly dissimilar to those of the consented development, and on that basis that the planning history could be afforded more weight than might be the case were there a greater difference in these effects. Therefore, despite the conflict with the development plan, having afforded significant weight to the planning history and the existing planning permission, it has been recommended that the planning permission be granted. However, the allocation of weight to material considerations lies with the coroner, and a decision could quite reasonably be made to the effect of do not outweigh the development plan. The recommendation is as set out in the report and follows here. I've just put it onto the slides. I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you, Chair. I recognise the presentation has been quite lengthy.
Thank you very much, Morag. I mean, I think you've actually done very well in terms of the lengthy presentation we've had. I'll now ask if anybody's got any questions to ask Morag at this point. And I know there have been instances where the sound has dropped out, but still through the presentation there is plenty of information that we've had on the screens to overcome that to some extent anyway. So I'll open it up for any members who have any questions to ask of Morag at this point.
I
Councillor Gordon Murray.
Thank you, convener. Just a question. Maybe I've missed it. I apologise. Why has there not been a definitive noise threshold in the construction and the operation of the wind farm? I've been trying to search for it, but maybe I've missed it. But you could let me know. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Maura, can you answer that?
Yes, I can confirm that there has been an extensive noise assessment carried out and limitations have been set. Environmental Health have recommended a condition which is in accordance with the Institute of Acoustics model condition, updated to reflect local background noise levels. That condition would then be managed by a condition which is the last condition in Appendix 1 to your reports. It's a very lengthy condition that runs over 3 to 4 pages. In terms of construction phase mitigation, again, the applicant has, through the environmental statement, committed to adhering to noise limitations, which again would be managed through condition. There would also be dust mitigation to accompany those noise mitigations, given the proximity of particularly the borrow pits and the construction laydown areas to both the north and south end of the settlement.
Okay. You happy with that, Councillor Murray?
Yes, I was looking for a figure, but it's quite a complicated situation. I thought there might be an actual figure of decibels.
Maura, can you respond to that? Is there a figure of some kind that would give the decibels? Presumably they'll be setting that against the background noise, and that may vary from time to time as well, but I'll leave it for you to respond to that, Maura.
That's correct. There is a decibel level, but I will need to go through the report to look for it. It's not something that's in my head, but it is very definitely within the report, and it is also within the condition, which members have Appendix 1. You scroll to the end of the very end, the noise condition is at the very end, and the decibel levels are set within the condition there, and that has been reviewed by Environmental Health.
Are you okay with that, Councillor Murray, and make sure that we can get these decibel figures to you once that's possible?
Thanks, convener. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Angus McCormick, I think, and then Councillor Kenny John MacLeod.
Thank you very much, convener. I just need to clarify something with you first of all. I mean, I haven't done the training, so obviously I can't determine anything, but could I ask a question?
You can certainly ask a question of Morag, yes.
Okay, thank you very much, Katrina. I'm interested in the new heights of the turbines and the fact that it now goes up to, I think, 140 meters at the blade tip, and yet the increase in the capacity rises from 42 to 48.3. It seems an awful lot of hard work to go to make a difference of 6.3. Why is it the difference so small? Is that to do with the height of the turbine itself?
Maura, I don't know if you can answer that.
I'm afraid the technical detail of why I'm not party to that is the information that is set out in the application and in the environmental statement. Each turbine will have an out. I did work it out, but I think they were originally each turbine was 3 megawatts, was it? 3 by 14. There's a small increase per megawatt per turbine. But
okay.
Obviously the manufacturer will set out what output you'll get out of a turbine of a particular blade length.
Okay, Angus, are you happy with that?
Well, yes, I understand. I mean, I'm asking a technical question right enough. But I'm assuming that the reason that they've chosen this particular turbine is to get it up as close as possible to 50 megawatts, but not go beyond that because they don't want it to go to the Scottish office for a determination. I'm assuming is that part of that argument at all?
As far as I understand it, they're just looking to maximise the output they can get from the consented wind farm. They haven't. It wouldn't really be for us to question why the merits of why they stopped at 48.3.
Okay, right. Councillor Kenny John MacLeod, and then Councillor Ray Mackenzie.
Thank you very much, Connie, and thank you very much for the report and the very forensic analysis and very, very fair and balanced analysis that we got on the pros and cons of the report. Just to clarify, in terms of our own policy, I think you mentioned I would suggest a 2-metre buffer zone would be required between main settlement and the wind farm.
I think you mean 2 kilometres.
So,
yeah.
Our units are going to be aware today. A 2-kilometre buffer zone. You do not feel now that is significantly material to consider that an overriding reason to have concern about the reduced distance. I'm just wondering what the rationale of your thinking is as technical appraisers really of that. And the other thing is really I think you mentioned there's mitigation for the flicker effect, given that there will be the setting sun as often as it does appear, is going to be behind these. There should be I imagine quite a potential for shadow flicker effect. And you mentioned that was going to be mitigated. Can you just explain just how that mitigation would take place?
Morag?
Okay, thank you. If I go to the first point, first of all, regarding the 2-kilometre buffer, the Comhairle's own supplementary guidance on wind does indeed set a 2-kilometre buffer. And therefore, that is why, like when we carried out the first stage of the assessment, considering the application afresh on its own merits, our recommendation would be that our assessment is that it does not comply with the development plan and the material considerations do not outweigh that. So in the absence of the previous decision, our recommendation would be that the wind farm should be refused. However, we are not starting with a blank sheet of paper. We require to acknowledge that the principle of development of a wind farm on that particular site has been granted, and that's a material planning consideration. Then the challenge of, well, how do you give weight to that comes into play. And the only way that we could conclude to do that is to compare the effects of what is now proposed with the effects of what has previously been consented. And that has informed the weight that has led to the recommendation. It would be equally fair for the council to place different weight on that and come to a different decision. It is very much one of these cases that there are arguments both for and against. Coming to the shadow flicker, this proposal now, because of the longer blades, does have predicted shadow flicker effects, because the wind farm is to the west of the village and the blade turbines, when you multiply the blade length by 10, it means that there would be a number of houses that could potentially be affected by shadow flicker effects. However, the technical solution for that is that has been proposed by the developer in their EIA, and which Environmental Health College have looked at, is the fitting of a software component to the turbines that are closest to the settlement. And that software would then basically turn the turbine off, on and off, to eliminate the shadow flicker effect at certain times of the day and certain times of the year. And that therefore neutralises the significant effect it will work, because a mitigation has been put forward that has been deemed acceptable.
Okay, thanks for that, Morag. Are you okay with that, Kenny? I'll call Councillor.
Yeah, thank you very much. I was just wondering just how the technical solution for mitigating the flicker effect is pretty basic. Just switch them off when there's likely to be a problem, if I understand correctly.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Mackenzie.
Thanks, Convener. I'm in the same position as Angus McCormick. So obviously I won't be taking part in the decision, but obviously it's a huge report this, and well done to Morag to actually get, not only to write it, but to get through it tonight. My question is, whatever the merits or not of the application, it's really to do with the access roads and the amount of traffic that will be going through the village, which will obviously be, I would imagine, pretty high. Can the applicant be made in a condition to build the access road that comes in before you get into the village, before the actual construction takes place? That's just my question.
Morag.
First of all, I mean, there was significant concern, including by the community councils, in relation to the traffic impacts of the development. And for that reason, we actually included some of the developers' responses on that as Appendix 6 to the report. In terms of the work, in terms of how they would programme the work to deal with the access roads, the intention is, in order to avoid hauling rock from Stornoway, the intention is to build the internal access tracks using the borrow pits that are on site. And these are both located to the north of the wind farm site. So the intention would be that before they build the wind farm, they would first of all have to build the track. So they would basically open the borrow pits to the north and work from north to south to construct the track inside the site, and then open out the track onto the south of the village. Once that track was in place and the new southern access was in place, that would then reduce the pressure of taking traffic up through the village to the north. But it's also set out that no large components would travel through the village. They would all be delivered to the southern access, which would have to be completed ahead of any components being delivered.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Morag. Thank you, Ray. Councillor Roddy Mackay-Used.
Thanks, Convener. I'm just worried that this would set a dangerous precedence by contravening the local development plan. There's a huge difference between the original height of 126.5 metres and 140 metres. There's also significant issues with the effect on the natural environment and the planning department's own pros and cons, if you like. The negative effects are double what the positive effects are. Now, my question really to Morag is, with the proposed development versus the consented development, the decision that the planners have come to, is that just an opinion or is it based on anything specific?
Morag.
It is our judgment, but where we got to, like in the report, is to compare. We've gone through on an issue by issue basis each of the effects of the consented development and compare them with the proposed development. And when it came down to it, there were only a small number where there was a difference. Those differences were impact on Blanket Bog, which was increased on account of larger turbines. Secondly, the visual effect. Now, it was already predicted to be significant, major and adverse. So by how much further is a judgment. And then in favour of the proposal is that it would power 2,000 more homes than the original 42 point 6 megawatts when you take it up to 48. So there'll be 2,000 extra homes nationally powered by green energy. So they were the main differences in terms of the comparison between the consented and the proposed. And at the same time, we looked at, well, what has been the changes in policy in that time? And the changes in policy were, first of all, the government had strengthened the arm of local authorities to set like a buffer not exceeding 2 kilometres on grounds of visual separation, but at the same time had set a net zero target for greenhouse gas emissions, a very ambitious target to net zero by 2045, and had, in order to let onshore wind farm developers find a route to market, had supported the move towards larger machines that would generate more power from existing wind farm sites. So when you weighed those policy changes against one another, there's for and against, but they don't give you a real steer. And therein lies the challenge of the application, is that it isn't an easy decision to arrive at. We have to make a recommendation, and we've made one, but ultimately it's for the Comhairle to come to its own decision, placing weight on material considerations, given the development is contrary to the development plan.
Thank you, Morag. Are you okay with that, Roddy?
Yeah, I mean, I just a quick comeback really is, I mean, I realise that we can now, give consent to developments within the 2 kilometre buffer zone, but this seems to be, this is less than 1 kilometre. This is just over half a kilometre, if I'm reading it right. So it's very close to the houses.
So if I could just come back in there. The nearest of the wind turbines is 1 kilometre from Lochside. The wind farm track, substation and the quarries are within 500 kilometres of the houses to the north and the south. But the wind turbines themselves are all located between 1 and 2 kilometres. So the wind turbines are all between 1 and 2.
I think the substations are 500 metres rather than 500 kilometres.
Yes, sorry, 500 metres.
You're okay, Morag. It's been a long shift for you. You okay with that, Councillor Mackay?
Yes, that's fine.
Thank you. Councillor Cal Macmillan?
Thank you, Convener. I would have to congratulate Morag and all of the planners for such a comprehensive assessment of the development. I must confess that I would find it very disappointing if this had been ruled as being a development to be turned down if it hadn't had previous planning consent. As a point of order, I'll go to my usual bugbear of red-throated divers, which are the most prevalent bird in the world, and the invasive species called white-tailed eagles, which come up, and the fact that we are talking about a blanket bog being removed or lost through the installation of turbine footprints or foundations. It's not as though there's a lack of bog in Lewis. What we have is a lack of economic generation. And it was just to ask the question, has the COVID pandemic of the past year changed any of the planning policies or any of the policies that were considered for the decision being arrived at for this project?
Morag, can you answer that question specifically?
The development plan was adopted in 2018, and the planning policies of the Comhairle are set out in that document. It is a requirement of officers and indeed the Comhairle to consider all matters in taking a planning decision. It may give different weight to different matters, but it must take into account all of them, including impacts on ornithology, blanket bog, economy, And the only thing I would say, like, add to that, is that the significant effects included in this development are largely on visual amenity of the settlement, albeit I acknowledge that there is a small difference between the effects on Blanket Bog between the consented and the proposed.
Okay, thank you for that, Morag. I'm not seeing any further hands go up, so I think we'll have to move to a decision on this, and we also need to be clear about which members have carried out the planning training and which haven't. I don't know if anybody's got a list of that. Yes, right behind. And I'll just go through the list in terms of all of those who have done the planning training, and I'll take them from. I'll just take them numerically. John Mackay, yes. Councillor Ronald Fraser, yes. Councillor Cal Macmillan, yes. Councillor Ian Murdoch MacLeod, yes. Councillor Roddy Mackay, yes. Myself, yes. Councillor Norman MacDonald, yes. Councillor Keith Dodson, yes. Ian McLean Macaulay, yes. Neil Mackay, yes. John A. McKeever, yes. John Norman MacLeod, yes. Ian Archie McNeil, yes. Donald Manford, yes. Paul Francis Steele, yes. Euston Robertson, yes. Paul Anthony Finnegan, yes. Councillor Grant Fulton, no. Councillor John Mitchell, yes. Councillor Angus Morrison, no. Councillor Alistair MacLeod, no. Councillor Finlay Stewart, yes. Councillor Charlie Nicholson, yes, although he's declared an interest. Councillor Ray Mackenzie, no. Councillor Angus McCormack, no. Councillor Roddy Mackay, yes. Councillor Gordon Murray, yes. Councillor Donald Crichton, no. Councillor Cal MacLean, no. Councillor Kenneth MacLeod, yes. And Councillor Kenny John MacLeod, yes. So effectively it's Cal MacLean, Donald Crichton, Angus McCormack, Ray Mackenzie, Alistair MacLeod, Angus Morrison and Grant Fulton who are not able to participate in the vote that we're about to come to. And there are recommendations there for approval. And if you want to run through them, Morag, very quickly, or is everybody happy that we just go straight to the vote? And following those who have done their planning training, and we will then turn to the vote. So the recommendation, Morag, do you want to read it out? You're on mute, Morag, sorry.
Sorry, Convener. It's recommended that the Comhairle approve the planning application subject to the application of planning conditions which are based upon the draft set of conditions provided in Appendix 1 to the report. Their finalisation to be delegated to the Director for Communities. Secondly, the completion of either a new or a variation to the existing Section 75 Planning Obligations Agreement with Eilean Wind Farm and other relevant land interests to secure existing commitments with updated sums for the provision for a planning conditions monitoring officer, and to add measures to secure the implementation of the terms of agreement between Eilean Wind Farm and the Met Office re-impact on the weather radar. That the Chief Executive be granted delegated authority in consultation with the Director of Communities to complete such an agreement, and when appropriate to discharge the existing agreement following an application from the developer once the new agreement has been registered.
Okay.
And, sorry.
There's one more. Recommendation C.
And a direction be made under Section 58.2 of the Town and Country Planning Act, the effect of which we direct that Section 58.1 is not to apply as respects the permission, and instead that the permission is to lapse on the expiration of a 5-year period from the date upon which it will be granted.
Okay, thank you very much for that. We move on then to the vote, and what I'll ask you to do is I'll call you out in the same order as I had on the sheet previously, and if you're in favour of approving this planning application, I want you to say yes, and if you're against it, I want you to say no. And I'm seeing Councillor Ian MacLeod's hand going up just now. I really don't want to prolong.
Thank you, Commissioner. No, this won't prolong it. It's just at least twice during the presentation I totally lost connection, so I don't feel in a position to vote. Having not had the full picture.
Okay, that's fair enough. When I call your name out, you can just make sure that I get that right. Okay. Right. I'm going to start now. Councillor John Mackay.
Yes.
Councillor Ronald Fraser.
Yes.
Councillor Cal Macmillan.
Yes.
Councillor Ian MacLeod.
No vote, abstain.
Councillor Roddy Mackay.
No.
Myself, yes. Councillor Norman MacDonald.
Yes.
Councillor Keith Dodson.
Yes.
Councillor Ian MacLean Macaulay.
Yes.
Councillor Neil Mackay.
Yes.
Councillor John A. McKeever.
Yes.
Councillor John Orman MacLeod.
Yes.
Councillor Ian Archie McNeil.
No.
Councillor Donald Manford.
Yes.
Councillor Paul Francis Steele.
Yes.
Councillor Ushton Robertson.
Yes.
Councillor Paul Anthony Finnegan.
Yes.
Councillor John Mitchell.
Yes.
Councillor Finlay Mackenzie Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Charlie Nicholson declared an interest and left the room. Councillor, go down to Councillor Roddy Mackay, leader.
Yes.
Councillor Gordon Murray.
Yes.
Councillor Kenneth MacLeod.
Yes.
And Councillor Kenny John MacLeod.
Yes, agree the recommendation.
Okay, thank you. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 20 people have voted for approval, so that decision is carried. Thank you very much for your questions and for paying attention to the presentation that was given so ably by Morag. I think I also need to say that I appreciate very much the fact that Morag was able to be with us today, although in the last couple of days she's had very trying times in terms of her being off the island for family reasons. So thank you very much, Morag, for all the work, not just what you've done today, but also in terms of the work that's been done by the whole department in terms of getting this planning application presented to us in a way that has been acceptable to most of the members. So thank you very much for everything you've done, Morag.
I would say I would second that.
Thank you. We'll now get back to inviting Councillor Crichton. He's in. Councillor.
I'm here to read the flag.
Thanks. Councillor Nicholson, I think.
Yes, Convener, thank you.
Anybody else? Are we waiting for anybody else to come back in? Okay, no. Can we move on then to item 6, and this is in relation to the Outer Hebrides Local Transport Strategy 2020 to 2030. largely to do with fixed links, and it's a report by the Chief Executive, and it notes the request under Standing Order 6 that the Comhairle consider whether a Bunbeckla to Skye fixed link should form part of the Outer Hebrides Local Transport Strategy 2020 to 2030. The report outlines considerations in respect of this. It notes that during the consultation on the local transport strategy, there was no indication of support for fixed links between the Outer Hebrides and mainland Scotland. There was, however, interest in fixed links across the Sound of Harris and the Sound of Barra, which is reflected in the high priority action within the local transport strategy of a high-level review of connectivity across the two sounds, considering economic impacts and whole life costs. Transport Scotland is in the process of concluding the Strategic Transport Projects Review, Review 2, that's STPR2, a potential tunnel, dual carriageway width between Bunbeckla, Rarnish and Skye at Naste Point, has emerged as an infrastructure option within STPR2. It is suggested that in the event that the Comhairle wishes to consider the matter further, that a seminar be arranged to consider the many issues which permanent connection of the Western Isles or a part or parts of the Western Isles to mainland Scotland by way of a fixed link and what this would raise. It is also suggested that the Comhairle would require to undertake detailed island impact assessment and community consultation before considering its own policy stance on this issue. Such a process would enable an informed policy stance to be taken in advance of the next annual review of the local transport strategy. And I'll invite the Chief Executive, Mr. Burr, to answer any questions that members may have, and there are recommendations for approval at paragraph 3.1 of the report. Mr. Burr.
Yes, thank you, Convener. You've really outlined the main points of the report, so I'll be very brief. Just a word of thanks, first of all, to Anne Murray, Strategy Officer, for her assistance with the preparation of this report, which was, of course, at fairly short notice. This request for a meeting, and this report is about adding a request for fixed links between the Western Isles and mainland Scotland to our local transport strategy. As you've noted, there is already a reference in Scottish Government's transport strategy, and we will, of course, further explore what is meant by that and how Scottish Government views that as part of national strategy. I would have expected, of course, as we noted this morning, at Policy and Resources Committee and last week at Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, a reference to an island's impact assessment for such a major decision. And that's really all I will talk about, Convener, just now, is really paragraph 2.4 or alternatively 6.3. They're much the same thing. There are a number of important policy considerations to be assessed, I suggest to you, before the Comhairle should adopt a policy position on so changing the connectivity of the Western Isles that its island status, or of a part of it, would be ended. I think that requires some careful thought. I think it requires, on the statutory side, an impact assessment, and I would suggest to you that that would require extensive community engagement and consultation. There's a lot of relevant material out there from the Faroes. Of course, the Faroes has great inter-island connectivity, but there are issues from that. For example, the Faroes is one electoral district now. It's increasingly seen as one economic unit. So there's a lot to be thought about, not just from the Faroes, but also, of course, from Skye, also, of course, from Berneray, Eriskay, Scalpay, our own islands, which have been connected in that way. So to cut a long story short, really, I would suggest, and this is why the recommendations are worded in this way, recommendation A, that you obviously note that we're having this discussion, which follows a request for a special meeting. Note the policy implications if you agree with these. Then consider whether you want to take this further, and recommendation D, if you do. I think this is classic material for a members' seminar. We would link in, of course, with the work on the Faroes, which we've considered earlier, and we would maybe think about how to take forward any consultation and engagement. But it's a major policy decision, I suggest to you, and if you're minded to take it forward, I think we need to discuss it informally as a council. Thank you, Convener.
Thank you very much, Chief Executive. Does anybody have any questions on that? I think Mr. Burr made it clear what the process will be with regard to that. I'm seeing Councillor Cal Macmillan, you had a question for the Chief Executive, and then Councillor Keith Dodson.
Thank you, Convener. First of all, I would like to thank the Chief Executive for preparing this and the people in the Strategy Office and the members who supported this being called so that we are here today considering it. There was a proposal this morning or after the rising of PNR for an amendment to be put to this, and I'm not sure if if it has been circulated to all the members, because I certainly would like to put an amendment to the 3.1a to be a bit more positive in our response to Transport Scotland's inclusion of this project in their STPR2 and what they see the number of projects happening over the next essentially 2 decades, which in terms of strategic projects runs very quickly. It's 20 years or thereabouts since Eriskay was joined to the south end of South Uist, and it has had a tremendous benefit to Eriskay. Similarly with Battersea, Scalpay, and when we look at Berneray without the bridge, we are looking to pull out all the stops so that we connect the island to the road network of the remainder of Lewis. So I'd seek the Chief Executive's guidance to see where the proposed amendment is and what the current status of that proposal or the proposed amendment is, and if it can be circulated to the other members.
I'll bring the Chief Executive in, Councillor Macmillan, but I'm not aware of any amendment to the recommendations that are proposed there. Chief Executive.
Yes, Convener. There are 2 amendments notified by Councillor Macmillan. One to the decision report on Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, and another to the decision report on Policy and Resources Committee. Am I right, Councillor Macmillan? These are the 2 amendments to which you're referring.
One of them was to the Comhairle item 6, this one here, so that we had an amendment to item 3.1a that was given to the Chief Clerk and yourself, Chief Executive, this afternoon. It was proposed by myself and seconded by Councillor Murray.
I see, Convener. I've been heavily involved in other matters, including the notice of poll this afternoon, so I may not have seen that correspondence. Can Mr. Langley assist?
I don't think there's any of us aware of it, and the reality is I think there is sufficient time between now and when we'll see these fixed links in place to allow us to consider that and debate it. But at the moment, there is no amendment that I'm aware of.
Well, just to be clear, Councillor Macmillan, I have two amendments from you to the 2 minutes of the 2 decision reports of the 2 committees, Transportation and Infrastructure and Policy and Resources. Given I thought we were dealing with those, my answer would have been we have to deal with the business in the order in which it comes. So given we are at the moment looking at the item on local transport strategy specifically to do with that, if you want to move a competent amendment to this report, that's in order, because the matter is on the agenda in its own right.
Right, very well. Thank you, Chief Executive. I've sent
But I will have to see the amendment. Sorry, convener. I will have to see the amendment, obviously, before we debate it. But
yeah, I've sent it through to you as well, Chief Executive. I'm not sure if I think it was reasonably competent, and it will be seconded by Councillor Murray.
convener, the only email I have from Councillor Macmillan relates to amendment to P&R decision report and transportation decision report, and that's from 1:56 p.m. this afternoon. And at 4:23, Councillor Macmillan confirmed that Councillor Gordon Murray would be his seconder. I don't know if Mrs. Macaulay or Mr. Langley have anything additional.
Convener, I could help the Chief Executive. I think an email was sent at 13:41, and he's copied in it about an amendment to Comhairle item 6 on the 31st of March 2021.
Yes, convener. Yes, I'm seeing that in my emails. I think that's an equivalent amendment, I think, Councillor Macmillan, to what you've submitted against the two committee minutes. Is that correct?
It's similar but different, Chief Executive. The two committee minutes are that the letter being sent by the Chairman of Transportation includes a bit more support, not only to this project, but also to the relocation of the Malig ferry terminal to Loch Nevis for shelter from the winds. So they are similar but different. This refers to item 6 on the Comhairle, whereas the one at PNR and Transportation referred to the letter that will be sent by the Chairman of Transportation, if that makes sense.
Convener, I'm sorry, the email of 141 does not include any reference to Malig.
Yes, apologies, Chief Executive, you are correct. I missed that off. My fault.
Can I just again? I think there is ample time for people to propose amendments and have them presented to whichever committee it is. There's ample time to do that between now and the next meeting series, and I think this just illustrates that when people are submitting amendments, numerous amendments at the same time, that it is quite challenging for members of staff to deal with them and have responses ready, especially within 1 or 2 hours of the meeting taking place. So I think there's absolutely no argument against what is being proposed by Councillor Macmillan, but we have to have amendments that are put together in a way that makes sense to all of us, to be perfectly honest. All of that will be taken into account in terms of item 6, and it will also be taken into account. It's pretty much word for word what is there for the policy and resources, and what was going to be put in place for Transportation and Infrastructure Committee. So they're all saying exactly the same thing, and I don't think anybody is pushing back against that. But we do need to tidy up the way we take these things forward. I'm seeing Councillor Roddy Mackay, the leader.
Yes, thank you. I think to try and avoid going round in circles here, anybody listening will be confused. We have in front of us item 6, which has got recommendations A, B, C, and D. And the final recommendation is if the answer to recommendation C is in the affirmative, if we want more information and reports on the matter, we should ask the Chief Executive to arrange a seminar. I think that we can't go beyond that. I don't think we've got any mandate or any warrant to go beyond that. We've had no policy discussions around fixed links. We've had, to the mainland I'm talking about, internally it's totally different. We've got aspirations there. So external fixed links to de-island the islands is a huge issue. It's got huge social implications, never mind transport ones, to do with the air links, etc. It's a huge issue, and it's not something we can just drop into a conversation on a couple of hours' notice. So I would move the recommendation that's in front of us, which I think is as far as we can go at the minute. I would almost suggest that we should leave it for another council to see if they get a mandate to investigate this and to pursue it, because it's a huge issue. But failing that, I would suggest it would be reasonable at this juncture to just propose that we agree the recommendation 3.1, which concludes that if we want to look at it further, then we'll ask the Chief Executive to arrange a member seminar to consider the relevant policy issues. So I would propose we go with that amendment.
Thank you for that, Councillor.
Okay.
Okay. And in the final paragraph of the report by the Chief Executive, it says it is also suggested that the Comhairle would require to undertake detailed island impact assessment and community consultation before considering its own policy stance on this issue. So this is just a starting point, like I was saying, and I do think we need to take time to make sure that we get things lined up properly. Councillor Tal Macmillan, I'll bring you in again, then Councillor Dodson, then Councillor Gordon Murray, and Councillor Steele, and I want to close this item down, given the the freedom we have to deal with that in plenty time. Councillor Macmillan.
Thank you, convener. I would have to, I suppose it would come as no surprise that I would disagree with the council leader on this, and that it is my belief that we should put this to the vote so that we can express policy by the members, so that we actually come to a vote on this, and that we come out more in favour and more positively in favour of a fixed link to the mainland, because contrary to what the council leader has said, this has a lot of traction in Lewis and people in Lewis that I have spoken to, and to have the belief that it hasn't been talked about or that people don't want it is simply not a reflection of the people that have spoken to me and that I've spoken to. So it is something that is viewed very positively in Lewis, so that we can link to Barra and to Lewis, so that the whole island is connected to the Transport Scotland maintained trunk road. We are looking to do this, the spinal route, as a trunk road, and there is no clearer way to get that done as a Transport Scotland trunk road than to link the whole of the world to the Western Isles. And therefore, I would want this to be proposed as a competent amendment, and that members of Comhairle express their view individually through the voting system, so that we are aware of where we go with it. Thank you, convener.
I think the reality is, Mr. Macmillan, again going back to the statement that I read out, that there needs to be community consultation and island impact assessment on that before we as a Comhairle take a policy stance on it. So I don't see how members are going to be able to come to a decision one way or the other until we have greater clarity on what is being proposed here, and we have to undoubtedly consult our communities, and certainly you may have spoken to a few people. This has been discussed for many years now, but it has never moved forward because the Comhairle have decided that was not an option that we were pursuing at that time. That's not to say it can't be done now and it can't be done in the future, but that is the reality of the situation. Chief Executive, you wanted to come in.
Thank you, convener. Very briefly, this is an important policy matter for members, and of course policy is a matter for members, but the report has to recognise the factual situation, and it does that. And I note Councillor Macmillan's comments, but during the consultation on the local transport strategy, my colleagues advised there was no indication of support for fixed links. There may of course be that, but I think it is important, and it is my strong advice to you, that in taking a view on an important policy matter like this, that should not be done on the back of one report, which, while it sets out the issues for consideration, does not analyse these issues, since there hasn't been time and no instruction to do so. But that the full impact of these issues and the processes which the Comhairle has to follow should be assessed by members, in my opinion, in seminar form, but certainly by way of a fuller report. It is my advice to you that I don't think the Comhairle is in a position to consider all of the policy aspects of this at this time. It may choose to do so, of course, because policy matters are for you as elected members. But if Councillor Macmillan's amendment is successful, I will have to come back to the Comhairle to talk about how that can lawfully be implemented and give you my advice about how we include island impact assessment and, in my view, community consultation on the matter. So that's how the position rests from the officers.
Okay, thank you very much, Chief Executive. I'm going to turn to Keith Dodson and Gordon Murray and Paul Steele briefly, and then I'll come back to you, Councillor Macmillan. Keith Dodson.
Thank you, Convener.
Thanks, Convener. First of all, I have to totally agree with Councillor Mackay, the leader. I totally agree with what he's saying. The other thing is that have they seriously considered that if there was a fixed link, that this fixed link would still have to run in conjunction with ferries, because an element of the population will not go into a tunnel because of claustrophobic. If you've ever been in a tunnel and the vehicle is broken down and you're stuck in there for quite a while before that vehicle that's broken down is removed, it can be very, very frightening for people. So the ferry would still have to run, as far as I'm aware, still have to run in conjunction if there was a fixed link. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Dodson. Councillor Gordon Murray.
Thank you, Chair. I think if the Councillor Macmillan wishes to have the matter considered, I think he should, and the Comhairle should express its opinion on this. I think it's the right way, and the Chief Executive has given me assurance that he will come back again if the amendment is successful to tell us how this would be implemented. So I think we should express our view on this very, very important matter, especially to the youth Sambara. Thanks.
Councillor Paul Steele.
Thank you, Convener. Can you hear me?
Yeah, carry on.
Yeah, thanks. I won't take up too much time. I think just going back to something that we discussed previously was the Faroe Islands report, and I think one of the was to begin an engagement with the communities to establish the views on the tunnels. So I think we still need to carry that exercise out. And in terms of the report in front of us today, make a recommendation C to consider whether further information is required. I think I would quite like more information, so I would say if that was informative, and if that was to come back to a seminar, that would be my proposal.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Steele. Councillor Mackenzie.
Thank you, Convener. It mentions about an option has appeared in number 6.2, but I tend to agree with the fact I'm totally in favour of this, and I can see advantages all the way with energy links, possibly the wind power, wave power, whatever, tidal power, savings on that, savings on ferry and finance. We probably do need to retain some ferries. The Chief Executive made the point about the Faroe Isles. Are they no longer islands now? And in reference to possibly destabling their island status or whatever. Things like the communications and the interconnector and all these things can go through the tunnel. However, having said all that in favour of it, I agree. I don't think we have enough information at the present time. And I do think that we should have a major discussion about this. It's a long-term view. We certainly couldn't have this fixed link at a time when we don't have the fixed links between the islands. Otherwise, you're cutting off, whatever the percentage of Lewis and Harris is with regards to the outer islands. So obviously that's the first step, and it can, if there's funds available from some major source, from the government or whatever, in the future, that maybe they can go alongside each other. But you can't have this fixed link before the islands are joined up. Thank you. So to cut a long story shorter, I would be in favour of having a major seminar on this and looking to the future once we got all the facts and figures and how we can. Not that I would hope that we wouldn't be talking against it, but that what would come out of the seminar would be a positive step and looking at all the options. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mackenzie. Thank you for that. Councillor Manford, and then I'm going to close this down and I'm going to take it to the point where we have a motion and an amendment, and we will then count the number. Councillor Manford.
Thank you, Convener. I'll be very brief too. I echo the opinion of Councillor Macmillan here. There are lots of questions to be asked, but it's beginning the debate and the conversation that is going to search these questions out. Didn't identify interest. Part of that will be related to credibility. Is it credible to do such a thing? Well, most people in general terms would think it would be good to do it if it can be done. So feasibility studies on whether it is possible is a reasonable step to start talking about. The negativity of losing island status. Yeah, it's a statement, but that again needs question. Have we got a Skye, for example, severely impacted against by having the bridge? I don't think so, but maybe there is evidence that it is. We need that information. We need to talk about it. We could have been doing that right now in this amendment, but that's fine. That's me, Convener. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you very much. I think I would hope that there is a consensus that we will have a discussion about this in seminar form, as the Chief Executive has stated, and that is part of the recommendations at 3.1 for approval. And I'm just formally going to move that we accept the recommendations 3.1, including a seminar for members to attend to talk this through, as a number of people have said. And I'd just like to ask if anybody wants to second that.
Second that.
Councillor Norman MacDonald-Point has seconded that. Councillor Macmillan, do you wish to propose an amendment?
Thank you, Convener. Yes, thank you. I would like to propose an amendment. I shall read it out. An amendment to recommendation 3.1a that Comhairle support the project included in the STPR2 list of projects at 2331 fixed length Rarnish, Benbecula to Ruinage, Skye, so that Comhairle is supportive of integrating the island's spinal route Transport Scotland trunk road routes via the fixed link between Benbecula and Skye. Further, that Comhairle support the fixed link projects across the Sound of Barra 2328 and the Sound of Harris 2327 as part of Transport Scotland funded and maintained trunk road infrastructure in the islands. And I'm proposing that and I'm looking for a seconder. Thank you, convener.
Councillor McMillan, that's much more of a speech than an amendment. If I'm perfectly honest, I'm going to bring the chief executive in terms of the competency of that amendment before I invite a seconder for it.
Thank you, convener. Sorry to be pedantic, but just one point that I need to clarify on that amendment, Councillor McMillan. In the last line of it, you refer to Transport Scotland funded and maintained trunk road infrastructure in the islands, and I have to point out we have no trunk road infrastructure in the islands, so I presume by that you're meaning it's a policy aspiration that Transport Scotland fund trunk road infrastructure in the islands, but as it stands, that is not technically correct because our roads are not trunk roads and we have to fund them ourselves, as we know. So I think that would have to be clarified.
Yes, Chief Executive, the trunk road funded by Transport Scotland is a policy aspiration which will come with the fixed link. Thank you.
So just to be clear, convener, the amendment seeks the Comhairle's support for integration of a funded trunk road spinal route and a fixed link between Benbecula and Skye, and fixed links between across the Sound of Barra and the Sound of Harris. Am I correct?
Yes, Chief Executive, that is correct.
Thank you.
Seconder, Councillor Gordon.
I'll second it, convener. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. I mean, we've had quite a discussion on this matter before we came to the motion on the amendment, and I think what we can do now is just go to the vote with regard to that. And the motion is in my name, seconded by my namesake, Councillor Norman MacDonald from Point, and the amendment is in the name of Councillor Cal Macmillan, seconded by Councillor Gordon Murray. And I don't have anything to add to what I've said previously, so I'll invite you, Calum, if you have anything further to say at this juncture.
Thank you, convener. I would echo the Chief Executive's words previously that we are elected to be policymakers, and sometimes we have to make these policy aspirations evident to the constituents and the other levels of government in Scotland so that they know which projects that we are in favour of and how we see the world going forward. And connectivity is something that takes up a huge amount of our time getting there and back. And if we have fixed links, as has been the evidence in Faroe, that once they have the links, they never wish to go back to ferries. Not for any other reason, but that you know that the link is there. And Skye, as all my friends in Skye say, doesn't stop being not just an island, but the island, despite having a fixed link to the rest of Scotland. So I would say that as policymakers, we have to show a bit of leadership, and we have to show where we are going with this so that in 20 years' time, we can look back and say, we made a start. It will be for others to carry it on and finish. But as we say, and on that, if we take today and make a start on policy, there will be others who will put it into the technical reality of bringing it to fruition so that we have connectivity between Comhairle and Battersea and Merlinish and Uig so that we can all connect and be connected. Thank you, Convener.
Okay, thank you very much for that. I'll turn to my seconder, Councillor Norman MacDonald from Point.
Yeah, thanks again, Convener. Yeah, I seconded the recommendation here. I don't think we've got enough information just now. And as the leader said, de-island in the islands with respect to connecting to Skye via another fixed link or a tunnel or whatever, and then onto the mainland. I think we need to concentrate first and foremost on linking the islands, the spinal route, more than anything. And depending on there are several other initiatives which focus primarily on delivering that. I think the issues down in US deserve their own specific attention as well, because of the issues that have been with ferries over the last while. But I think we need to take the population with us regarding where our policy comes from with linking to the mainland. There are definitely pros and cons, but I think a seminar is the best way forward to ascertain not only the will to do it, but the costs of it, etc., and the benefits of it. So cost-benefit analysis, etc., needs to be investigated. I think we should concentrate on linking up the islands first and foremost and develop a decent spinal route before we investigate any other links. I'm for supporting you, Colin, as well, to a degree, but I think I don't have enough information. I would like to have more. But as I've said twice already, I think the spinal route is our priority just now, and I would like to see that advanced. So I think a seminar to discuss the pros and cons, the costs, and the willingness to do this, and whether we've got the backing of our islanders and what they see as the best way forward, I think would be a good start.
Thank you, Councillor MacDonald. Now turn to Councillor Gordon Murray, seconding Councillor Macmillan.
Thank you, Convener. I'm very happy to support this very ambitious amendment by Councillor Macmillan that will bring great benefits, I believe, to the Euston Barra. When we talk about the spinal route, etc., we need to emphasise these as priorities ourselves, because when the corporate strategy was last presented to us, there was no mention of the spinal route until an amendment had to be put forward to put it in to actually have the spinal route mentioned. So that's not a good message. I think that this is a very good amendment. I think it'll start the process, and I'm grateful for Councillor Macmillan for allowing me to second it, and I would urge members to support this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Murray. I'll invite Councillor Donald Manford now to speak, and then we'll see where we go from there. Councillor Donald Manford.
Thank you very much. First, I want to. Hello?
Yeah, carry on. Sorry, Councillor Murray's hand was still up.
Yeah, first I want to commend yourself, Convener, for permitting this to go forward. It's a very enlightened and a valuable opportunity. This isn't for today. It's not even for tomorrow. It's starting the first step of the journey. All of the things that we've talked about, we also have heard time after time the huge opportunities that are to the west of us. It's not going to be next year or the year after that, but it's going to be there. It's going to be coming. The discussion in there is whether the bases will be in the islands to take advantage of it, or whether they'll be on the mainland. It's not a case of good or bad ferries. Even if we have the best ferries, it will the fixed links between the mainland and the US, the entire Long Island, will make it far better opportunity for the benefits that are to the west of us to come in greater part to the Western Isles. That's planning for those who come after us. I very much support and thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Councillor Manford. Councillor Roddy Mackay, leader.
Thank you. I don't wish to prolong this, and I do not think this is the place to be going into detail on a discussion on this, because it has just come across our desk, as it were, in the last week. Just to reiterate, the recommendations are perfectly sensible. They say we should consider whether to seek further information, and if we want further information, let's begin the process with a member seminar. We do not have any mandate. We do not have any instruction from our people. We've gone through two community conversations about a range of issues. It has not been raised, and therefore I think that we do not have a position at the minute where we can commit to calling for a fixed link to the Scottish mainland, where there are huge implications for us as an island. in terms of everybody's talking about transportation, but it's more than transportation. There are social implications and wide-ranging ones, and we should be asking our people, is this something that they particularly want us to pursue? It is that fundamental. So what I'm suggesting, I think, is perfectly reasonable, that we go with the recommendations that are before us. It enables us to begin a discussion and enables us to start off on the right footing. This is no way to go about starting or calling for something that we haven't even consulted with people about. That's my position on it.
Thank you, Leader. Councillor Callum McLean.
Thanks, Chair. I would say that the amendment that is proposed by Mr. Macmillan and Mr. Murray, its aspirations and its ambitions are excellent, and I'm sure we all would agree with that. Yes, I've had it asked of me about fixed links to the mainland by a number of occasions, but it hasn't even happened in the last 3 years or 4 years. I've had it 10 years ago. But I'm quite content with what the leader is actually saying, that this will be incorporated into the 3D in the recommendations, that we do look at it. And I don't see one coming before the other, why we should have this one coming. But I see it as an aspiration or an ambition to look into it and certainly say what the leader is, put it to our people, put it to our communities. But I do think that it's excellent aspirations, excellent ambition. It's a good, but I would say that we should hold back and wait for the seminar. If, as the leader says, it can be incorporated into what the recommendations is actually saying, let's go with that. That's what I'm saying.
Thank you, Councillor McLean. I'm not seeing any further hands up at this stage. So we'll go to summing up, and I'll ask Councillor Macmillan to sum up, and then I will sum up thereafter. Councillor Macmillan.
Thank you, Convener. I shall be brief. If we look back 100 years, there wasn't a single plane flight across the Atlantic between Europe and America. All the traffic was seaborne. Now there is no seaborne traffic, and all the traffic is by air. And similarly, we have to try and look forward. And as my late father used to say, we go forward in the same way we row a dinghy, looking backwards. It is our duty as politicians, petty though we are, to try sometimes to turn round and seek the way forward, not just from where we've come, but from where we're going, to see if we can see the future. And for us, we have to try and get fixed links so that we are road connected to the remainder of Scotland, or if we think about it, so that the remainder of Scotland is connected to us. And with roads, when you look 100 years back, most of US had tracks. We now have roads. Admittedly, we would want roads with 2 lanes, but at least we have roads. And in trying to progress matters, we sometimes have to look forward and to see the vision. And even in some cases, a bit of tunnel vision can be good, because at the end of it, we can see the light. So I would recommend to my fellow members of Comhairle to try and support this as we go forward. Thank you, Convener.
Thank you, Councillor Macmillan. I'll be brief in terms of summing up, and the reality is there is nothing wrong with being ambitious, but there is nothing worse than being ambitious and failing in terms of delivering it. And that's why I think we need to take some time to look to see what we need to do. There are some fixes that are easier than others, and Councillor Norrie MacDonald was talking about the spinal route, which has still to be completed. And the reality of that is that most of the spinal route development will be in the Southern Isles, in Euston Barra, I would imagine. And I think that's what we need to start focusing on. And yes, we can be ambitious about other opportunities as well, but that is going to take time. And what we need to do is to make sure that we use the time we have to provide resources for people who live in these islands so that they don't start wandering away to other parts of the country. That's a really important thing for us. So I'm just going to close it at that, and we'll turn to the vote, and I'll ask Tim to take us through the sederunt. And the motion is in my own name, seconded by Councillor Norman MacDonald, and the amendment is in Councillor Macmillan's name, seconded by Councillor Murray. Over to you, Tim.
Convener, Norman MacDonald.
Motion.
Leader, Roddy Mackay.
Councillor Roddy Mackay.
Sorry, motion, sorry.
Councillor Callum McMillan.
Amendment.
Councillor Ian Archie McNeill.
Amendment.
Councillor Donald Manford.
Amendment.
Councillor Paul Francis Steele.
Amendment.
Councillor Roddy Mackay.
Amendment.
Councillor Ian Murdoch MacLeod.
Amendment.
Councillor Euston Robertson.
Motion.
Councillor Grant Fulton.
Motion.
Councillor Paul Anthony Finnegan.
Motion.
Councillor John Graham Mitchell.
Motion.
Councillor Ronald Fraser.
Motion.
Councillor Angus Morrison.
Motion.
Councillor Brian MacDonald.
Motion.
Councillor Alistair MacLeod.
Motion.
Councillor Finlay Mackenzie Stewart.
Motion.
Councillor Keith Dodson.
Motion.
Councillor Ray Mackenzie.
Motion.
Councillor Angus McCormack.
Motion.
Councillor Charlie Nicholson.
Motion.
Councillor Ian McLean Macaulay.
Motion.
Councillor Neil Mackay.
Motion.
Councillor Gordon Murray.
Amendment.
Councillor Donald Millicent Crichton.
Motion.
Councillor John A. McKeever.
Amendment.
Councillor Callum McLean.
Motion.
Councillor John Mackay.
Motion.
Councillor John Norman MacLeod.
Motion.
Councillor Kenneth MacLeod.
Amendment.
Councillor Kenny John MacLeod.
Motion.
22. So there are 22 members have agreed with the motion, and 9 have gone with the amendment. And that concludes this item. Move on now to item 7, recruitment to vacancy, and this report seeks the appointment of a substitute member on the Western Isles Integration Joint Board following the resignation of Councillor Paul Finnegan. And can I now ask for nominations for a substitute member on the Western Isles Integration Joint Board? Anybody want to propose anybody for it? Not seeing any hands coming up. So,
Convener, we have 3 substitute members at the moment.
Okay. The Chief Executive has informed me that we have 3 substitute members at the moment, and it may be possible if somebody has a wish to become a substitute member, that can be done at future meetings. I'm not seeing any hands up, so we'll take that course of action and take it forward to the next series, if that's okay. Okay, thank you. Item 8, committee decision reports, and the first one of them is Communities and Housing on the 23rd of March 2021, and
Yes, Convener, can I move the decision report of the Communities and Housing Committee of the 23rd of March?
That's Councillor MacLeod, seconded by?
Convener, I second the minute of the Communities and Housing Committee of the 23rd of March.
Councillor Mackenzie, thank you for that. We move on to Education, Sport and Children's Services Committee. And Councillor Steele.
Thank you, Conveners. I move the committee decision report of the Education, Sport and Children's Services Committee of 23rd March 2021.
Thank you. And we have a seconder for that.
I second that.
Councillor Paul Finnegan. Transportation and Infrastructure Committee of the 24th of March 2021. Councillor Robertson.
I move the recommendations of Transportation and Infrastructure Committee of Wednesday, 24th March 2021.
Thanks for that, Mr. Robertson. Seconded by?
I second that, Convener.
Councillor Cloud. Move on to next item, which is Sustainable Development Committee of the 24th of March. And there is an amendment proposed by Cal Macmillan, seconded by Councillor Donald Manford. I'll read out what the amendment is. Or do you want to read it out yourself, Councillor Macmillan?
You could read it out, Convener. The only change that we had made and agreed is that the funding would be 10,000 per unit rather than the 20 there, with the further 10,000 to be the subject of a report to the Sustainable Development Committee in June for equipment and the installations to these facilities, but otherwise it is as presented to you.
Yeah, I think there is a difficulty there, and I've mentioned it earlier on. I think when it comes to people proposing amendments, that we need to have amendments circulated to members so that they're aware of what the decisions are, rather than doing it on the hoof, as it were. I think it's really important that all members, when amendments are proposed to recommendations of a committee, that at least members of that committee are aware of it, and particularly the chairs and vice chairs. So, you know, coming in at this time is quite difficult. I'll read out what the amendment is as written, and you can adjust the 10K as you see fit. But the reality of this is that this will need suspension of standing orders for us to consider this, in that a decision has been taken within the last 4 or 5 months with regard to this issue. But I will read out the amendment as I have it here, and you can correct the 10K element of it. The amendment is that the Core agree that a report submitted to Policy and Resources Committee in terms of Standing Order 40, seeking the approval of funding support for the abattoirs in Uist and Barra to bring parity to the abattoir provision across the Core area through the provision of, and here it says 20K, I accept that's been changed to 10K per facility from balances previously saved on loan repayment charges, and that the funding be provided on such terms and conditions as the Chief Executive, in consultation with the Director for Communities, shall determine. So we now come to the point where we need to suspend standing orders if this amendment is to be accepted and voted on later. So we move to suspension of standing orders, and there needs to be a 2/3,
which is 21 members.
21 members need to vote in favour of the amendment for it to be considered and debated thereafter.
In favour of suspension.
In favour of suspension, that is. Okay, again, we'll just do it through the roll call vote again, and again, how can I put this? If you're in favour of suspension, you say yes, and if you're against suspension, you say no. Hopefully, people can follow that. Okay.
Nominate MacDonald, convener.
No.
Roddy Mackay, leader.
No.
Councillor Callum McMillan.
Yes.
Councillor Ian McNeill.
No.
Councillor Donald Manford.
Yes.
Councillor Paul Francis Field.
No. Hold on. Sorry, what was the question again? I don't like.
Can you switch off your microphones if you're not speaking? Councillor Paul Steele, are you a yes or a no?
Yeah.
A no is to do with not accepting standing orders, and yes is that if you're wanting standing or just suspended.
No.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Roddy Mackay.
No.
Councillor Ian Murdoch MacLeod.
No.
Councillor Houston Robertson.
No.
Councillor Grant Fulton.
Yes.
Councillor Paul Anthony Finnegan.
No.
Councillor John Graham Mitchell.
Yes.
Councillor Ronald Fraser.
Yes.
Councillor Angus Morrison.
No.
Councillor Murray MacDonald. No. Councillor Alistair MacLeod.
No.
Councillor Finlay Mackenzie Stewart.
No.
Councillor Keith Dodson.
No.
Councillor Ray Mackenzie.
Yes.
Councillor Angus McCormack.
No.
Councillor Charlie Nicholson.
Yes.
Councillor Ian McLean Macaulay.
No.
Councillor Neil Mackay.
No.
Councillor Gordon Murray.
Yes.
Councillor Donald Finnister Crichton.
No.
Councillor John A. McKeever.
Yes.
Councillor Callum McLean.
Yes.
Councillor John Mackay.
No.
Councillor John Norman MacLeod.
Yes.
Councillor Kenneth MacLeod.
Yes.
Councillor Kenny John MacLeod.
No.
So
12 votes to suspend, convener, 19 votes not. So there is no suspension of standing order.
no suspension of standing order, so that amendment falls at that stage. Move on to Audit and Scrutiny Committee. Sorry, apologies.
Did I not move my committee report, decision report?
Again, did I do that again? Sorry, I was too caught up in that. Apologies to Councillor Crichton. Sustainable Development Committee on the 24th of March 2021, and Councillor Crichton.
Thank you, Comhairle. I move the committee decision report of the Sustainable Development Committee that took place on the 24th of March.
Thank you for that, Councillor Crichton. Seconded by?
Seconded by
Councillor Norman MacDonald. Okay, and I think I have to apologise profusely to Councillor Crichton. I think we need to move sustainable development to a different part of the page. So thank you for that. Can we move on then to Audit and Scrutiny Committee on the 30th of March? Councillor Morrison.
Thank you, Convener. I move the committee decision report of the Audit and Scrutiny Committee of the 30th of March 2021.
Seconded by?
Happy to second that, Ian Macaulay.
Thank you, Councillor Macaulay. Yes. And we then come to Policy and Resources Committee on the 31st of March. And I have to say there is also an amendment that's been tabled for policy and resources as well. And I will read out the amendment as we have it. And the amendment is that the Comhairle support the fixed link project 2331 between Rarnish, Benbecula and Rowan East Skye to allow Transport Scotland to progress the project in conjunction with fixed links across the Sound of Barra and the Sound of Harris to integrate the spinal route into the Scottish trunk road network to connect the remainder of Scotland to the Outer Hebrides. And that amendment is in the name of Councillor Macmillan.
Convener, I would suggest to you that that amendment is superseded by the vote taken on item 6, which has clearly decided on the same subject not to take a view on this matter, but to arrange a seminar so that further information can be obtained. I would hope that the Corner would agree that that's the correct position.
Okay, thank you for that.
We have just taken a vote on the matter.
Yeah, thank you for that intervention, Chief Executive, and I hope that everybody is okay with that, and that will be dealt with along with the seminar that we've previously agreed that we will carry out. I'm not seeing any. I'm seeing a hand, Councillor Macmillan.
Thank you, Convener, and thank you, Chief Executive. I think the previous vote, as you say, supersedes this, and that we can proceed per item 6 of the current meeting tonight. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that, Councillor Macmillan. I appreciate that. Can I turn then to the Council Leader in terms of the Policy and Resources Committee on the 31st of March 2021?
Can I move the Policy and Resources Committee decision report from today?
Thank you.
I second that.
Councillor MacLeod.
I second that.
Seconded by Councillor MacLeod. And there is nothing further on that. And I think there is a notice of motion from Councillor Gordon Murray and Councillor Don Manford. Do you want to read that, Councillor Murray? And I will respond.
Oh yes, Convener. I thought I was going to get the last word, but it'll be yourself. So I'll get that. I'll read it out. I've circulated it to all members. That Comhairle and Eilean Siar 1 acknowledges the efforts that this council has made to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and promote renewable energy. 2 recognises that councils can play a central role in creating sustainable communities, particularly through the provision of locally generated renewable electricity. 3 further recognises that very large financial setup and running costs involved in selling locally generated renewable electricity to local customers result in it being impossible for local renewable electricity generators to do so, that making these financial costs proportionate to the scale of a renewable electricity supplier's operation would create significant opportunities for councils to be providers of locally generated renewable electricity directly to local people, businesses and organisations, and that revenues received by councils that became local renewable electricity providers could be used to help fund local greenhouse gas emissions reduction measures and to help improve local services and facilities. 4 accordingly resolves to support the local electricity bill, which, if made law, would make the setup and running costs of selling renewable electricity to local customers proportionate by establishing a right to local supply. And 5, and finally, further resolves to instruct the Chief Executive to inform the local media of this decision, write to local MPs asking them to support the bill, and write to the organisers of the campaign for the bill, Power for People, at 8 Delancey Passage, Camden, London, NW1 7NN, or info@powerforpeople.org.uk expressing its support. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Murray, and my response is as follows. I welcome Councillor Murray and Councillor Manford's acknowledgement of the extensive efforts made by the Comhairle in regard to greenhouse gas reductions and the promotion of renewable energy. I recognise the role that councils can play in this regard and agree in relation to the very large financial setup and running costs involved in retailing locally generated electricity. I also agree that these costs presently prohibit market entry for local authorities. The potential for a local electricity bill is a step in the right direction, which is why the Sustainable Development Committee considered the bill on the 4th December 2019, and the Comhairle subsequently agreed the principles of the proposed bill. At present, 258 MPs support the local electricity bill, but 400 MPs are required to make it law. The Comhairle is already listed amongst the 56 local authorities supporting the bill, which is also supported by over 300 community organisations and 55 national agencies. Given that the Comhairle has already considered the local electricity bill and is a publicly acknowledged supporter, I see no reason to write to the organisers at this stage. Similarly, the Comhairle has been public about its support of the bill. In November 2019, Councillor Donald Crichton, Chairman of the Sustainable Development Committee, stated in a press release that the principles of this new bill align closely with the Comhairle's ambitions in the area of electricity generation and supply. Councillor Crichton went on to acknowledge that this bill will simplify the process and reduce the costs faced by local supply companies. I am sure that Councillor Crichton would be happy to reaffirm to the media and to our MP the decisions of his committee and existing Comhairle policy with regard to the local electricity bill. Now move on to the final item, which is that the next scheduled meeting of the Comhairle will be on the 23rd of June 2021. And I think that brings our meeting this evening to a conclusion. Thank you very much for your contributions and also for your patience. And again, a very specific thanks to Morag for her contribution in difficult circumstances. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Convener.
Good night.
Thank you, Convener.